As mentioned before, we have a very, very special guest joining us on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast tonight to help us preview Week 8 against the Tennessee Titans. The Cincinnati Bengals host them, and we have former Super Bowl team member of the Tennessee Titans, Denard Walker, defensive back, now the host of the BLEAV and Titans podcast, helping us to talk about Week 8. Denard, how you doing tonight?
Man, I'm doing great, man. How you guys doing?
We're doing well. I mean, despite 1-5-1, I guess we're doing all right. Should be, could be, would be, maybe 3-4 wins more for the Bengals at this point. But it is what it is. It's Cincinnati Bengals football, and we're excited to have you with us. As I mentioned, obviously you had a great career. Now you're representing the BLEAV Podcast Network and the Tennessee Titans, so that's very exciting. We'll hear more about that in a minute. I guess I want to, before we kind of dive into the X's and O's a little bit of the game itself, I guess I want to start a little bit with, you played for the Titans late 90s and into 2000, where you were playing the Cincinnati Bengals quite a bit. I guess I want to ask you a little bit about if you can give us a little insight of the Titans' internal perception of the Bengals at that point when you went up against them. Were they kind of perceived as a little bit of a doormat, and did that perception change quite a bit maybe when Marvin Lewis took over in 2003?
Because when I was doing the show this morning, I actually had a recollection of the old Bengals when I played them. And let me tell you something. That team was good in 1990. Well, let me tell you something. It was kind of like hot and cold with that team for the 4 years that I was in Tennessee from 97 to 2000. And let me tell you something. They had some playmakers. You had Carl Pickens. You had Darnay Scott, Corey Dillon. And then when those guys got rolling, I mean, they could play. They can play with anybody in the league. But the biggest question mark that I have with that team is they just really sometimes didn't have any heart. And what I mean by that is you didn't know what you were going to get, on Sundays. You might get a Bengals team that was going to play hard, and they typically played hard when they had Boomer and Size in their quarterback, but they basically annihilated us and kicked us out of the playoffs in 1997 because of the way they played down in Cincy. So it was to me, I'll be honest with you, I always thought that organization had a lot of good talent, and I just thought when they got the right coach in there and the right mix of players, I knew that they were going to take off.
Yeah, Jeff Blake was pretty good, but he was no Steve McNair, and that's for sure. And that's kind of the difference of why one team went to the Super Bowl, one team kind of stayed in the rut. But I guess let's transition towards the modern day Titans. They're 5-1 right now after going through a little speed bump with the COVID business and whatnot, and they're taking command of the AFC South. It's a pretty well-rounded team when looking at the rest of the NFL. But if there's one area of weakness on this team that you would have to say that is the one thing that can potentially slow them down, what would you identify that as being?
Well, as I kind of look at this unit, I mean, they're strong, of course, at the running back position, because of the D train, Derrick Henry. And Jeremy McMillan has been playing lights out, kind of spilling Derrick, which, giving him some rest time. And that's really huge, especially as they get down the stretch, going into the season. The team is strong on the offensive line. These guys, that there's continuity among all of them. They play well together. I know we lost Taylor Lewan. That's a huge blow. But, Ty Sembrano has stepped in. He had a heck of a job against Pittsburgh last week. Played well. Saffold, Jones, Davis, and Kelly, they're so underrated as a unit. I think the tight end position is strong. I think the only question mark that I would have is the secondary. That's because they don't have Adoree Jackson. And when you don't have your ace, out on the field, it hurts your team. So I think when they get Adoree back, I think he's going to strengthen that unit in the secondary, and I think you're going to see some better play from the entire defense, because I think when you add him into the mix, I think he makes your defense better, just his presence along being on the field.
Adoree Jackson's my boy, Denard. He's a USC guy, so I'm a big USC guy. I always liked Adoree Jackson. Very good player, very talented, highly athletic. So you're speaking my language there. We're talking with Denard Walker, member of the Tennessee Titans, 1999 AFC Championship team, Super Bowl member of that squad, joining us to talk about Week 8, Tennessee Titans taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. You mentioned his name a little bit, Denard. Taylor Lewan. You know, the Titans lost Jack Conklin in free agency. You now lose Taylor Lewan to an injury. You didn't really mention that as much of a weakness, but maybe long term, is that something where you're looking at as a potential looming issue, especially when you're going into the time of year when the weather gets bad and the Titans may be wanting to rely a little more heavily on Derrick Henry?
No, I don't, because of the way that he played last week. And listen, he's a proven veteran. You know, anytime that a guy, so many times we get caught up in the backup position when you lose a starter and how would he perform. You know, I've always said that when a guy, he has a number and he's a part of somebody's 32 teams, he can play. And the same expectations that they have when Taylor is in that game, they have the same expectations on Ty, that he can go out there and get the job done. They expect that. He's a pro. That's what makes guys, that's what gives them a chance to make a really good living, playing a game that they love, is they earn that spot, they earn that position. And I think Tyson Brayo, I think he gels with that group. Again, I don't think that it's gonna be a drop off. I know you can't replace a great player like Taylor, but again, when it's a guy's chance, I mean, Ty, this is a chance for Ty to show, you know, listen, a lot of people that he's just as good, if not better, as Taylor. You know, I hate to say that, but that's the mentality that you have to have. It's just your chance. And I think as he takes, you know, advantage of this chance, you know, that he's been given, I think he's going to utilize his abilities, and I think he's going to play well from here on out, because the guy can play. He's the real deal. So, again, like I said before, I think this is a team on the cusp of doing something great, and I still think that they have the chance, even though they lost a key piece, you know, on that squad.
Funny enough, you know, Ryan Tannehill, not like about a year ago, was a backup as well. And then he kind of asserted himself as the starter of that team, and he took the league by storm. And I think a lot of people expected him to kind of come back down to earth, but he's not. He's playing like a legitimate MVP. In your mind, what has been the one thing that Tannehill's taken from last year and really elevated into this year to keep up with this pace? And do you believe he's capable of leading the Titans to a Super Bowl?
You know, he's just gotten better. I mean, what he's done is I said earlier, in our podcast when we initially started, that as Ryan goes, so does this. I think he's been down some really bad roads in Miami, of course. That's why I ran him out of there. So there's nothing that can phase him. He's a veteran. And the thing that you love about Ryan is, you know, he's poised in the pockets. He's tough. We saw the hit last week that he took in the red zone, but he gets right up. He's resilient. And I think this team emulates his play. And one of the things that I love about quarterbacks, you know, in this league, you can stay stagnant and you can be out of a job, or you got to be like Russell Wilson. You get better, you know, each year you play. And that's what Ron has done. He's gotten better. He's brought different elements to his game. We saw, you know, against Buffalo when, you know, he didn't necessarily have the big yards passing, but we saw when he would, you know, break some long runs. You know, people forget how athletic he is. They forget his athleticism. He was a starting receiver at Texas A&M, and the guy's a stud. He's 6'4". You know, and I remember Ryan at Texas A&M, because I'm a Texas guy. He was a great receiver. He was a number one receiver at Texas A&M, and he probably, if he stayed at receiver, he probably can play receiver in the league. And that's just to show you his athleticism, and that's something that you can't coach. And that's his strong point. You know, people just forget that this guy, he's just like Russell Wilson. You know, he just don't run as much, but when he does, I mean, he's a monster. It's really hard to defend because he's so versatile. And that's why I love his game. I mean, he's basically utilizing all of his dogs and abilities, and it's just been fun to watch him play.
Talking with Denard Walker, host of the BLEAV in Titans podcast, former NFL player, spent 4 seasons with the Tennessee Titans. Happy to have him with us, previewing Week 8, Bengals versus Titans. I want to go back a little bit, kind of to your playing days, if I can, and kind of bridge today from your playing days with the Titans. You mentioned his name as well, Derrick Henry, obviously one of, if not the best running back in football right now. You played with a great one on your sideline. And in fact, the old AFC Central had just a slew of great running backs in your time. I mean, there was Fred Taylor on Jacksonville, Corey Dillon on the Bengals, and then, of course, Bettis, on the Steelers. And then, of course, you had your guy, Eddie George, and a lot of Bengals fans are very familiar with him from his Ohio State days. He had just a great career, an absolutely massive back. If you had your choice, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. If you had your choice and you were saying I had to pick one of those two backs, Eddie George or Derrick Henry, I know it's a different game. I know different styles of play, maybe a little bit. But if you had to pick one of those guys, who would you pick and why?
Let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you right this. I'm telling you right now, I'm going with E.G., Eddie George. Why? Because he's one of my favorite players along Steve, Aaron McNair. They're my two favorite players of all time. And the thing that I love about Eddie is when you see Derrick is a reflection. He basically is a modern-day Eddie George. 6'3", 240-some pounds. People forget how fast Eddie was, how elusive, how big he was, and how strong. But I will always go with Deuce 7. He is the best running back that I've ever seen in my life. He's the toughest guy that I've ever seen. And let me just say this right now. I can sit here and talk all day about E.G., but the thing that I love about Eddie, and people don't know this, is one thing, is that after a game, you got to understand our whole offense was predicated around E.G. Everything was around, especially in those days, because that's when you really ran the ball. I mean, basically 30, 40 times a game with one back, a lot of times. And the guy would be in a boot on Monday, but he'll be full go on Wednesday at practice. Never took a practice off. And I tell you what, he played like that. Just a tough guy. He was a great person. And right now they're considering him. Hopefully he get in the Hall of Fame. I think he had a Hall of Fame career, and I'm just hoping he gets that. I hope he gets in.
Well, that's good. And then the Bengals are playing the lesser running back in Derrick Henry this week, but they still have a tough task in tackling Derrick Henry in this game. It's going to be a big mismatch for the Bengals, but as someone who covers the Titans and follows the Titans, what is one way, or I guess, what do the Bengals have to do to beat the Titans? Because it's going to be it could potentially be an ugly game, and one that the Bengals are definitely not favored in. But what do they have to do in order to win this game?
Well, I don't want to give out the secret, because if I give out my secret sauce, then what's going to happen is you guys going to take that and you're going to give it to Zach Taylor, and then all of a sudden, if they lose, then this could come back to me. But let me just say this. And I don't want that to happen, because I don't want – listen, I'm too old to be trying to fight some young boys today. I'm telling you, I'm not that old dog. I'm an old dog. I'm not like what I used to be. I'm 47 years old now, so I'm not trying to get into anybody's fight. But I'll say this. The Bengals, let me tell you something. I love this offense, okay? And I know you're going to talk about defense. You know what your offense is going to do. They basically have, pretty much giving you a chance to win all year. This is a team that probably could be 5-1 or 5-1, as opposed to 1-5-1. But the defense is really what's kind of their Achilles heel. And you know what? Until they can kind of get those guys up. I mean, I like Bledsoe, I like Covington, but again, they're young, and I think the secondary is they're kind of hurting right now. But again, I think if this team can find the way. Because you are a reflection of how Zach Taylor actually got the team going in the right direction, because they've been in every game this year but one, and that's against the Ravens. So they keep losing close. But one of the things they got to do is that they just got to learn to make plays. And once they learn to make plays and finish out games, this is a dangerous football team. I know their record don't reflect that, but this is a team that can, if you step on the field with the mindset that this is a 1-5-1, they'll spank you. They will spank you. So I would tell people in Cincinnati, hey, listen, you got a great team. Once they get this defense going, you guys are going to be good for a long time to come.
I hope that's the case. And, I think Zach Taylor could use all the help he could get right now to scrape together a win. So, even though your secret is safe with us, I think he could use some help closing out some games. Before we get score prediction, by the way, we're talking to Denard Walker, former defensive back for the Tennessee Titans. He is now the host of the BLEAV and Titans podcast, BLEAV Podcast Network. Before we get your prediction and hear a little bit more about your show, oh, I think we dropped him.
What happened?
I think we dropped him. Hey, Denard, I think we lost you. Sorry there. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay. So before we get on out of here with your score prediction and whatnot of the show, or of the game rather, and hear about your show, I want to get just a little bit of info from you here. You were part of the team that was part of the Music City Miracle. I wanted to just get a little bit of your thoughts as you saw that play unfold, because that is obviously one of the most iconic plays in NFL history. And, I would like to get your perspective on that as a player on that team.
Oh boy, you had to go back there, didn't you? Yeah, I just did a podcast. I did a show with the people at Buffalo, and they said we're not going to ask. Look, okay, this is everybody always want to, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to be honest with you guys, and I hate to say it like this, but if we were playing in Buffalo, they would have went ahead and played the Colts the following week. But because we played at Tennessee, I do believe that we got the call. So I wasn't really looking at the play, because I'm the guy that basically gave up to help put them in field position, because I had a bad day covering, and I barely stopped. It was at Price. He got a little hitch and ran about 10 yards on me. It was a shoestring tackle that I was able to make, that I made. But, yeah, I truly believe that sometimes when you're at home, you get the call, and I think we got the call that day. I think if we were in Buffalo, I think Buffalo would have went ahead and played Indianapolis the following week.
Talking with Denard Walker, host of the BLEAV and Titans podcast, and we'll hear more about that in one sec. Before we do, Denard, how do you see this one playing out? Week 8, Bengals versus Titans.
This team. When I watch them and I break them down, man, this is a good team. That's the thing about it. Their record don't really reflect their play, because every game they've been in but one. And that's the thing. If they can basically learn to close out a game like they start, this is they can basically make a run and be a hunt. Come like December and January. I mean, the team is that good. They just cannot close out games. So until they learn to close out games, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to give the edge to Tennessee. Now, I'm bad at this. I'm bad at making predictions for scores, but I'll say Tennessee. This is going to be a close one. And I'll say 31-24. Yeah, 24-31. I got the Titans winning. Okay, fair enough. You are a bit more complimentary to the Cincinnati Bengals than maybe some others out there. So we appreciate that. We appreciate your time. This has been a heck of an interview. Been very, very enjoyable. Denard, where can people find your work now that you're on the BLEAV Podcast Network, hosting the show, talking about the Tennessee Titans? Well, yeah, BLEAV in Titans. My man Davey Hudson and I, we basically just, you guys go in there. It's a great podcast. We have fun with it. We just talk football. We basically argue with each other. We go at it. We nitpick. Everything is like Davey comes with the analytics. I come from the football side of things. I don't want to hear his, analysis about, what this percentage, and then I'll come back at him. He comes back at me. So it's really fun. We have a really great time with the show. And it's just basically breaking down, the following game, what happened. I'm giving my opinion, which it probably don't mean nothing to anybody. So you can also find me on Twitter at Denard_Walker, and not be everything about what's going on with Tennessee. But I also want to say one thing before I go. I want to say you guys should be excited, because Joe Burrow went to my alma mater, LSU. There you go. You guys got one heck of a quarterback. I love this guy. I love his swag. You guys got one of the best quarterbacks that's going to be in this game for a long time. So, again, Cincy fans, you guys need to be excited. It's your man. Denard Walker, former Tennessee Titan, 9-year NFL veteran, member of the 1999 Tennessee Titans Super Bowl team, and now the host of the BLEAV in Titans podcast, part of the BLEAV in Podcast Network. So,
Denard, I just want to thank you on behalf of John Sheeran and myself. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I know you're an extremely busy guy, but it's been a lot of fun talking. And hopefully when these two teams play again, maybe that's postseason sometime in the near future, or maybe, somewhere down the road. We'd love to have you on again and talk to you.
Same, and thanks guys for having me. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was Denard Walker, former Tennessee Titan. John, that was a lot of fun. I know there was a little bit of a disconnection there. Sorry about that for folks. It didn't take too long to get him back on the air, so that was good. But great having him on. Really enjoyable interview, and we hope you enjoyed that. Good. That was fun, John.
It was. It's nice talking to players that played before me, and I get to learn these insights about games that I never saw in person, but I've just heard about with hearsay. So another great guest on the show.
Absolutely, helping us break down the game against the Tennessee Titans, and we're going to talk about our take on that here in just a second. As usual, you can get this show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, or I guess Google Podcasts now, Megaphone, iHeartRadio. You can get the show on YouTube. There's a little subscribe link right underneath John Sheeran's shoulder there, so click that if you want our YouTube stuff. And, of course, all the stuff is on Cincy Jungle's Facebook, so we appreciate the support. Subscribe how you can. Leave us a rating on one of those platforms, too, the audio platforms, that is. Help boost a little bit of visibility for us on iTunes and whatnot. That would be great. We appreciate the support, as do Ace and Zim of the Orange and New is the New Black podcast, and Matt Minnick, who does the